Welcome back to the Nairobi Health Show. Today we have Susan Peirce Thompson, who is the president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and the founder of the worldwide Bright Line Eating movement. On average, participants in her program lose a significant amount of weight in just 2 months and are able to maintain that loss for years to come. Equally astounding, published research shows that through her approach, and post-menopausal women lose weight as quickly as women in their 20s and 30s. To date, 100,000 people from more than 100 countries around the world have participated in her online weight loss programs. Her first 2 books, including Bright Line Eating, The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free, became New York Times bestsellers and instant Hay House favorites. Her work weaves the neuroscience of food addiction with powerful insights from positive psychology, IFS, and 12-step recovery to outline a roadmap for achieving true integrity and a self-authorship around food. The Bright Line Eating mission is to help 1 million people around the globe discover lasting food freedom and have their bright transformations by 2025. Without further ado, please enjoy this interview with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson.
Welcome to the podcast with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson. You probably know her because she's a founder of Bright Line Eating, which is a very popular and successful methodology. So, Dr. Thompson, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And your reputation precedes you. I know several people who do Bright Line Eating, including a close family member. I won't mention their name in case they don't want to be have their information made public, whatever. But their story is essentially struggling with many, many modalities and different ways of eating for years and discovering you and your book, and it changed their life. And like, finally, this works. Now, I bet you hear that story a lot.
All the time. As a matter of fact, it's the standard story. What we do is we serve people for whom nothing else works. People who've tried every approach to weight loss, every food style of eating. They've tried all the things and nothing has lasted. Maybe they've lost weight bunches of times, but they've never been able to get their excess weight off and maintain it and have freedom from the food chatter in their brain. And they find Bright Line Eating and it clicks and it works for them. And that is the typical story around here. So yeah.
Fantastic. And part of my interview here is going to be somewhat self-serving because I am a self-declared fuzzy line eater. Okay. I'm what you might call a 90%er. Okay. I eat better than most. I exercise every day. I have a generally healthy lifestyle. I'm a fitness coach. But I'm not Bright Line, and I'm really interested in talking to you about this. I'm 90%.
Yeah, totally. Well, it works for you. It's clearly working great. I mean, I wouldn't recommend changing a thing, but have you taken the quiz, the food addiction susceptibility quiz?
I have not.
Have you heard of it? All these people that you know who've done Bright Line. Okay, so that's the place to start, Dave, and that's where really our conversation should start. Food addiction is real, but not everybody is affected. Not every brain is equally susceptible to addiction of any kind, and food addiction is along for that ride. The predispositions are genetic primarily, environmental a little, and 1/3 of the population is just not susceptible to addiction. And I mean, literally, you shoot them with heroin every day, they won't become addicted. And you say, well, that's impossible. Heroin's just powerfully addictive. And I'll be like, well, they'll develop withdrawal when you stop shooting them up with heroin, and they'll maybe have some cravings for a little bit, but they won't want to use afterwards. And if you look at people getting sent home with powerful opioid prescriptions after back surgery or something, having to take these pills every 4 to 6 hours for weeks and months, a lot of people don't become addicted. When it's time to wean off, they do it quite easily. Some people don't need a cup of coffee every morning. They have some caffeine when they want some. They'll have a cigarette at a concert if they want it. Then the middle swath of the population is somewhat susceptible to addiction. And then there's the high end of the population, which is again about 1/3. So it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 in these categories, who are profoundly susceptible to addiction. And addictions get wired up in a particular domain. So just because you're susceptible to addiction in general doesn't mean you'll develop food addiction in particular. But of course, processed addictive foods are widely consumed. 80% of the calories in the supermarket have added sugar in them. So a lot of people are getting hooked, and you, it sounds like, are not. Like I don't even know, Dave, are you one of these people who, after a big fancy celebratory dinner out, you have one bite of a dessert and eat it really slowly and then sigh and say, oh, that's all I needed. That hit the spot. I don't need any more. Is that you?
If I'm going to self-diagnose, I actually do think I have an addictive personality, and that I'm the type of person that I'm all in with things, and I have to control that. Like I have to restrain myself from kind of derailing when I come across something new. And so, and I have had addictions, and I made a lot of bad choices as a teen and had to overcome addictions later.
I resemble that comment.
Okay. So, I feel like my Achilles heel in health is sugar. I love sugar. I currently am on a track where I'm trying to only have a sugary treat once a week. Okay. So, and that's exercising a lot of self-control. Like, and sometimes sometimes I'll break that rule. You asked about how much I would have at an event or something. My wife and I have been sharing desserts at a meal for many years. We're pretty good at if we go out on a Friday night and it's a good restaurant and they have some yummy dessert, we'll order one and we'll share it. And so I am generally able to control the binge urge, but I do have to control it. I could easily eat many servings of sweets.
Okay, well, that paints a very different picture than the impression I got from your fuzzy line eating intro. So you'll have to take that quiz. I'll be really curious. The quiz asks you to think back to a time in your life when your eating was its worst. Not a day, but like, a stretch of time when your eating was absolutely at its worst. And that is because of the neurological reality in the brain that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Once you've developed a pattern of eating that's pretty bad, it's not like you can't ever recover from that, but you're always eligible thereafter, right? You have to be more vigilant than the average person who doesn't have those fiber tracks already wired in the brain, those neural networks already established. The brain holds on to those. It doesn't neuroplasticity is real, but the previously formed pathways also stick around. So I ask people to think back to a time in their life when their eating was at its worst, and then answer just 5 super quick questions. And I'm curious how you'd come out, maybe from everything you've just said, like a 6 or a 7 or something like that. But it sounds like with effort and a certain amount of control and a lot of healthy habits and a lot of motivation, you're keeping it in check. I mean, bright line eating isn't for everybody. It's for people who really want it, people who are willing to do it.
Yeah, really good point. And you'd mentioned kind of the MO of the people who generally come to you. And would you say that's a minority of people? I mean, what percentage of grown-ups in the United States do you think are the best candidates for bright line eating?
Yeah, great question. I tend to think that the best candidates for bright line eating are 8s, 9s, and 10s on the susceptibility scale, or people, that's the food addiction susceptibility scale. Again, there's a quiz. People can just take it at brightlineeating.com. And people who are lower on the scale, but are motivated to lose their weight and really want sort of a cut and dried solution that really works. And there's certain personality profiles that prefer that. So Gretchen Rubin talks about moderators versus abstainers. And there's this great old quote from some guy a long time ago that said, abstinence is as easy for me as temperance is difficult. Some people just really like to rip the Band-Aid off. They're going to quit smoking cold turkey. They're not going to use a patch. They're going to dive into the deep end of the pool, not wade into the shallow end slowly. And some people just want a lot of clarity around their eating. Tell me what to do with my food. I'm just tired of not knowing, tired of the contradictory and confusing information about nutrition that's out there. I just really would like clarity around it. So anyone like that is a good candidate for bright line eating. But people who are high on the susceptibility scale probably have don't have other good options, to be honest.
Now, in psychology, you've alluded to addictions and the percentage of people who are susceptible to addictions. A lot of people call things addictions that aren't really addictions. You mentioned that caffeine, for example. I understand that clinically, caffeine is actually in the realm of habit forming, not addicting necessarily. Those are different things in the psychology, right? Like just because. But could you speak to that? I mean, I know this is your area of research.
I will. Well, it's interesting because for my third book, I spent a lot of time in the DSM-5 looking through the substance use disorder chapter, because food's not in there, which it should be. And caffeine's in there. Caffeine is absolutely right next to alcohol and heroin and opiates and all the things.
Oh, is it?
So yes, it is. So,
okay.
So in terms of the most modern American psychology, the DSM-5, caffeine is absolutely addictive.
Oh, my mistake.
Yeah, but a lot of things haven't made it yet. They're just saying we need more research, sex addiction, food addiction, internet gaming addiction, things that I think we're all pretty clear are going to be in there, at some point. They're just super conservative and super slow putting things in there. I mean, I have 3 college textbooks on my bookshelf with, hundreds, thousands maybe of citations now on food addiction, medical textbooks, the whole book is on food addiction.
But is there anything to this concept though, for us to, our armchair psychology, for those of us sitting listening, between understanding the difference between habit forming to addiction? I mean, how do we wrap our heads around this in self-diagnosing our own habits?
Yeah, totally. It's a very interesting question. And I think there's some, different perspectives that are possible, some nuance in there. But a lot of people say, for example, everyone's addicted to something. I would beg to differ.
Okay.
Again, certain brains just don't go all the way to addiction. They might have powerful habits that feel counterproductive or whatever. But, just to maybe illustrate, there were times in my eating where I didn't want to eat addictively so badly. I didn't want to eat addictively. Like, I knew that the consequences would be devastating. I mean, we're talking about picture the mother or father who's addicted to crack cocaine and is about to lose their child to Child Protective Services and knows if they use again, they're going to lose and they love their child more than anything, and they just can't not do it. And
that's a heavy example.
Yeah. I have eaten pints of ice cream with tears streaming down my face, getting to the end of the pint and just thinking, I don't want to be eating. I don't want to do this. Okay. I started eating addictively once at the beginning of a Disney cruise, and knew that if I got into the food on that cruise, the cravings would overpower me, and I wouldn't show up for my kids and my husband. Like, I wouldn't be around them. I couldn't. Wow. I needed to hide in a corner and just shovel food in my mouth, and I didn't want to pick up, and I just couldn't stop. So there's a level of harming oneself that is involved with addictions. Now, when they've reached a certain point, right? Now that's an advanced addiction. So whether someone who's in an earlier stage has a bad habit or an addiction, is, I don't know, it might be hard to tell. I often say, try leaving it alone for a good long period of time and see what that's like. Try not having it for a month or 6 months. If you've got a good motivation to leave it alone, like a good motivation, like, okay, you're now pre-diabetic, Here's an interesting statistic for you. I think 180,000 legs are amputated in the United States each year.
Wow.
From type 2 diabetes. That's bad enough, right? Most of those people know it's coming, and they haven't changed their eating, right? They know it's coming. Right. They're about to lose a limb. They're about to go blind. So their leg is amputated. 55% of them will lose their second leg to amputation within 2 years. As if getting the first leg amputated wasn't enough of a wake-up call, right? So now we're talking about addiction. Like, no matter the stakes, you can't stop.
Okay, so that being said, give us your let's start with the elevator pitch for bright line eating.
Yeah.
What's the
So I'm in an
brief
elevator.
description?
Someone says, what do you do? I teach people how their brain is blocking them from losing weight.
Cool. Succinct. Powerful.
I worked on that. That was one of the first things I developed when I started Bright Line Eating, was the elevator pitch. I was in some workshop about that. Yep. I teach people how their brain is blocking them from losing weight. A lot of people don't realize, like, it's the Oprah conundrum, right? You can't look at Oprah and say, well, she's not letting herself be successful. She's clearly afraid of success. Like, well, no, that's probably not true, right? Or,
Not true.
she doesn't believe in herself enough. No, that's not true either, right? Like, why can't Oprah lose her excess weight? And it really comes down to, at a certain point, and there's 3 levers in the brain that are flipped when someone's brain is really hijacked, where they could no more take off their excess weight in that state than they could hold their breath while running up 40 flights of stairs. You can't muscle your way past certain survival circuits in the brain. You can't.
So
It doesn't matter.
You really do come at this from the cognitive side, not so much the physical side. I mean, you really are talking about the wiring of the brain and how it all starts with how we're wired, the addictions, and overcoming that. And so that must be an important part of your program, is teaching that. So you're not handing out diet plans. I mean, you probably have a plan, but I mean, that's not where you start. Because you could, the person you described, if we hand them a diet plan, they're probably not ready to follow it.
Well, they can follow it for a while. They can follow it for a little while, but then, I mean, and this is where the food piece is such a conundrum for the person who's trying to change their behavior, is the food equivalent of trying to hold your breath while running up 40 flights of stairs. Look, if you try to hold your breath while you run up 40 flights of stairs, let's imagine that if you held your breath while running up 40 flights of stairs, you'd get $50 million if you reach the top, right? $50 million is waiting for you if you could do it. So you're super motivated.
Okay.
You still wouldn't make it. And at some point, running up the many, many flights of stairs, you would believe that you had decided to breathe. Some thoughts would happen in your head. I don't think I'm going to make it. Oh my God, I'm really in a lot of pain. Okay, just another flight. And then at some point you would say to yourself, forget it. I can't do it. Or I'm just going to take a breath, and you would breathe, but it would feel like a decision. But can we just agree for a moment? That's not really a decision. Your brain was demanding the oxygen, right? The problem with the food piece is that gets enacted over the span of weeks and months as opposed to seconds. So you don't notice as much that something has been shifted in your physiology, in your brain, in your endocrine system, and in your brain, that has tripped circuits that have created a voice in your head that made it seem like you chose to say, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to have pizza, beer, and wings with my buddies on Friday night, and I will start again on Monday. It'll be okay, right? There's some sort of decision that it feels like you made, but you no more made that decision than you decided to breathe and forego that $50 million. You were absolutely tricked into that by your physiology. So you mentioned sort of the physiology, the biology, the psychology. Where I'm really fascinated is right at the intersection, that thin membrane between the biology and the psychology. Like, how does our brain trick us into thinking a certain way about what we're quote unquote deciding to do with our food? It's very reassuring for people who come to Bright Line Eating to learn how their brains have been hijacked and their brains have been blocking them from losing weight. And of course, they could raise a family, get an advanced degree, run a marathon, do all the things that they've done, but not lose their excess weight and keep it off. That it really is a problem that's been out of their control for a long time.
And so what's the process? Behavioral change is hard. It's hard for all of us. It's kind of like what you said, we feel like we have so much free will. We can do anything we want. I can wave my hand, I can stand up, I can move around. I feel like I have so much control over my body and my mind. But I'm also a meditator, and I've got a 6-year daily practice now of meditation, and I've been to retreats, and I've learned that I don't have near as much control over my mind as I used to think I did. For example, I can't stop my thoughts. And when I sit, thoughts come unbidden. And that's true for everybody. People think that a world-class Zen monk meditator can sit and stop their thoughts. That's not true, right? All of us have thoughts that are just kind of coming in, and there are intellectuals like Sam Harris that don't believe we even have free will, that it's all an illusion,
right?
And that the sense of free will can set us up for some failure. And I don't know where I stand with all that. I'm interested in it. At the end of the day, I'm just more interested in how do we use that in a practical way. And where I come from, it just seems like we need a higher level of humility with ourselves about how much control we actually have over ourselves. But I don't know what we do with that, right? As far as you figured that out for people, especially in the health realm, who just chronically have this problem that they're trying to overcome. And so that was just kind of a salad of a question, just all kind of
well, let me put some flesh on the bones a little bit to give a more concrete example. I love everything you said, and it's all really true. And frankly, it's a salad of a question because it's a salad of a topic. I mean, it really is sort of, when you try to get in there and nut it out, it's bajiggity, the whole thing. So let me give you the example of this weird phenomenon that we see that a lot of people who come to me for help, who come to Bright Line Eating have it, but not everybody, but it's pretty common. I call it insatiable hunger. This is not hunger like, oh, I haven't eaten all day and my stomach is rumbling. This is, I just ate a massive dinner and now I feel like sitting on the couch and watching TV, but I need something more to eat. My stomach is full. If I stop and ask myself, am I hungry? The answer is clearly no, but I absolutely need to eat. And I'm going to the cupboard now for a bag of chips. I'm going to sit on that couch. I'm going to eat the whole bag of chips, big bag of chips. And then I'm going to go to the freezer for ice cream. And I'm going to top off a massive dinner with, an unbelievable amount of additional food. And as a matter of fact, it feels like I could bend my elbow almost forever, that my hand wants to go to my mouth wants to chew, my brain is demanding more food, my stomach wants none of it. It's like I'm full. I'm not even tasting that good anymore, but I've got to keep eating. That's insatiable hunger. It's the full signal, the stop signal that never comes. And a lot of people experience this. I experienced it for sure. The cause of this, so that's a behavioral issue, right? And I'm not going to be attacking this issue really with choices and free will and thoughts and all that. We're gonna back up and say the root of this is something called leptin resistance. Leptin is the hormone that tells your brain, I'm done eating, I'm full. I don't need any more food. I don't need any more fuel. And it even goes a little further and prompts you to get active. So you can use all this great fuel you just ingested to go kill a wildebeest, build a hut, find a mate, do something productive, right? So we all wish we had more leptin on board. And believe me, when it was discovered in 1994, the pharmaceutical companies spent millions maybe billions, I don't know, trying to get it into some form that they could profit off of, but no success so far. And the reason is that no matter how much leptin you have circulating in your blood, it won't help if your brain can't see it. And that's the leptin resistance. The leptin is being blocked.
Interesting.
And it's being blocked by a combination of high baseline insulin, high triglycerides, and high inflammation in the hypothalamus. Now, I can lower all of those dramatically within a week or two by putting someone on the Bright Line Eating food plan. And so as their physiology changes, their blood changes really rapidly by eliminating sugar and flour, by giving them a nice fasting window at night so they're not eating between dinner and breakfast. The next morning, their blood starts to clean up. And by having them eat just a massive amount of vegetables, more than they're used to, and having them weigh and measure according to the Bright Line Eating food plan, their blood will clean up. And that insatiable hunger will go away. They'll get to the end of dinner and they'll stop eating because they've weighed their dinner and they know cognitively, I've had enough food. That was my amount. it's a massive amount, but it's finite. It ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've written down what they're going to eat the night before. So they know that their job when they start Bright Line Eating is to eat only and exactly what they write down the night before, according to the Bright Line Eating plan. So there's a lot of clear boundaries. They know what to do if they get a craving to eat any more or different than that. And their biology changes. So suddenly they don't have this insatiable, gnawing hunger anymore. And so we come at it from a lot of different angles. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And it's really interesting because when you first were talking about addictions and the cognitive aspects of this, the psychology, I'm thinking to myself, how does a doctor in New York write a book that can change so many people without having them all on the couch, right? Like getting to work, digging in and helping solve these psychological problems. But what you just said, I think, is really profound. And it does make intuitive sense that we could start with the biology, because our body in some ways is disconnected systems, right? I'm not sitting here thinking about breathing right now. That's just happening. I'm not healing anything. All I'm doing right now is talking to you, but my body is doing all kinds of stuff all by itself, right? So it does make sense to me. Again, this misnomer I think we have had in the past, that we are somehow the little person behind our eyes inside of our head, right?
Yeah. The little homunculus.
There's a little control, the homunculus inside of our, but in actual fact, all this modern research that's coming out is so astounding on the mind, the gut brain, which used to be considered kind of a chakra Hinduish concept. And now science is saying, not so much.
Yeah. Right. There's a whole brain down there. Yeah.
There's a whole brain. It's making sense to me. And so that's also, it's also liberating what you just said. Super liberating, because like you said, the person who is in the situations as you have described does have the ability to change their behavior short-term, right? Everyone we can use this free will we have. The problem is we tend to think we can change ourselves permanently. Like we're like at levels of when we're high levels of motivation, like I'm feeling really good. It's the new year. I'm going to hit the gym. I'm going to eat really well. I'm going to get up at 6 and I'm going to bed early, right? And on January 1st, we feel like we can conquer the world and do all that stuff. And then by January 8th, we're doing one of those things.
Yeah, it's unraveling. Right? Totally.
But what you're saying is
really astute. We in Bright Line Eating, we really, really capitalize on people's initial motivation. And we set up a whole bunch of structures and systems for them, doing things that will make it downstream easy, automatic, effortless even. It's almost as if, when you teach a little kid to brush their teeth, really you're gifting them with a lifetime freedom from having to decide to brush their teeth, right? 95% of adults in America brush their teeth in the morning and night without thinking about it, without trying to, without having to feel motivated to, without a sticky note on their mirror to remind them. They just brush their teeth morning and night. And there's the unfortunate, few percent who, for whatever reason, balked at developing the automaticity around that. And now as they fall asleep every night, have to say, oh, I should get up and brush my teeth, right? I am so grateful not to be plagued by the right before bed thought, I should get up and brush my teeth. I never have that thought because I've brushed my teeth already. And I didn't even decide to. It didn't matter if I was sick. It didn't matter if I was traveling. It didn't matter if it was New Year's Eve and I was out late. I am the equivalent of the mom who is, reminding the 8-year-old to brush their teeth. I teach people to eat in such a way that in 4 months' time, they will be eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the right foods at the right time, without needing to want to, without needing to feel motivated to, without a sticky note on their mirror to remind them. They will just be eating the right breakfast because they wake up and that's what they do, because they do Bright Line Eating. They're a bright lifer.
Fantastic. Well, let's segue right into that. I think we've laid an excellent groundwork for understanding the why and the background that you've brought to this. But now give us an overview. Now, of course, people need to read the book. Now, you've written 2 bestsellers, correct?
Yeah, 2 New York Times bestsellers, and my 3rd book just came out in December. Yeah, so the first book is called Bright Line Eating: The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free.
Yeah.
That's where people should start. The
Okay.
second book is the official Bright Line Eating cookbook. And the 3rd book is Rezoom, REZOOM, The Powerful Reframe to End the Crash and Burn Cycle of Food Addiction, which is a next level, sort of more advanced book once you're sort of in the journey for a bit.
Okay, fantastic. Because all of you listening, you're just not going to get the whole story without and is the book the best way, or do you have like a program? Do you have something they can join? I mean, what else do you offer?
Yes, the Bright Line Eating membership is the best way. If someone actually wants to try Bright Line Eating out and give it a college try, I suggest, give it 2 weeks. You can do anything for 14 days. You'll know
Yeah.
at the end of 14 days if this is working for you. Just go to brightlineeating.com and sign up for the membership. It's $20 a month. It couldn't be more reasonable. $20 a month to change your life. And 60% of what you'll get in that membership in the first couple months is not available in the first book. The first book will give you an outline of the program, but what the first book does better than anything else is explain the science. So if you were intrigued by what I said about leptin resistance and that insatiable hunger, dive into that first book, get the science behind it, but be sure to join the Bright Line Eating membership, because that's where I really hold your hand. That's like the equivalent of teaching you to brush your teeth every day. I do that in the membership. I hold your hand, give you a fresh start, a clean slate, and start you off tiny, tiny morsels, step by baby step. And before you know it, you're doing it. Your weight's melting off, and it's easier than you imagined it could be.
Fantastic. And so if I join, you can remove my fuzzy line and replace it with a bright line, and I can be a perfect specimen of fitness and nutrition.
You can. You too, Dave Sherwin.
Fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about the diet. Where does the term bright line come from? What does that mean?
Yeah, a bright line is a clear, unambiguous boundary that you just don't cross. So, for example, if you're going to quit smoking, if you're a 3-pack-a-day smoker and you just got diagnosed with lung cancer and you really want to survive and be healthy, you're going to quit smoking. That means you're going to put up a bright line for cigarettes, right? A bright line for nicotine.
Yeah.
So the 4 bright lines are sugar, flour, meals, and quantities. So no sugar, meaning nothing added to your food to make it sweeter, including artificial sweeteners. They dysregulate the gut microbiome, and also the sweet taste buds on the tongue have direct connections to the addiction centers in the brain. So no sugar, no artificial sweetener, no flour of any kind. And the association here, Dave, is that this is about drugs. And a lot of people have never really thought deeply about how you make a drug, like what makes something a drug. But let me just say, because the bright lines for sugar and flour handle the drug part of the food addiction, like the substance addiction part. And drugs are made. Drugs are made. So like heroin and cocaine, they come from plants. Heroin comes from the poppy plant and cocaine comes from the coca leaf. But coca leaves are not addictive on their own. There's actually a scientific paper demonstrating that. You can eat poppy seed bagels all day long. You will fail a drug test, but you won't get addicted to opium.
Interesting.
But if you take the inner essence of that coca leaf or that poppy plant, the inner essence, and you extract it, and then you refine and purify it down into a fine powder, you've taken a harmless plant and you've turned it into a drug. You've just made heroin or cocaine. And sugar and flour are made in that same way. You take a wholesome, healthy plant that I would eat. I eat potatoes, I eat corn, I eat beets, I eat brown rice, I eat all those things. But you take the inner essence of those plants and you extract it, and then you refine and purify it. And now you've created a drug. So that's what we eliminate in Bright Line Eating, is those manufactured drugs. And then the bright lines for meals and quantities have to do with the behavioral or process addiction piece. So this is the addiction to eating as a process, the eating itself, the need to put something in your mouth to sort of as a crutch to get through the day or to make you feel better. And so in Bright Line Eating, we eat 3 meals a day, nothing in between, no grazing, no snacking. And then we're careful about our quantities, not to restrict them, but in most people's cases to make sure that they eat enough, especially of the right foods. So the quantities are ample, but I do recommend a digital food scale. So,
and give us an example of some bright line meals. Give me an example of a favorite breakfast, for example, that you enjoy.
Yeah, totally. So I often will eat oatmeal for breakfast. And I'll have a bowl of oatmeal with a massive mound of blueberries and some ground flax seeds and maybe some nuts, maybe some yogurt. That's an example of a breakfast. For lunch, it's going to be protein, fruit, vegetable, and fat. So I might have, for example, well, it depends. Like today I was kind of lazy, to be honest. Now, just to say, bright line eating food isn't all healthy food. Today I had salami, cheese, cherry tomatoes, and a grapefruit for lunch. That's what I had for lunch.
Okay.
I know salami's not healthy, but there was no sugar in this kind of salami that I chose.
Right.
And like whatever, I won't do that every day, but that was my lunch. And let's see, for last night for dinner, I had grilled salmon and a bunch of green beans and a bunch of Brussels sprouts. Usually I'll have a salad, some fat. I think I forgot my fat for a second, but then at the end of the meal, I just sprinkled some cheese on my green beans and weighed it out. That was my fat. So yeah, I mean, it's really, we eat all real food. Like there's no actual food that we don't eat in bright line eating. The only thing we don't eat is the stuff that's, that was born in a factory and poured into a bag. Like that's what we don't eat.
Yeah, I mean, it's the epitome of shopping around the outside of the grocery store, nothing from boxes.
That's right. And we don't have any bright line eating line of foods. There's no 1 point brownies, right. Totally.
I love that. And also, I guess I hadn't thought about it much, but I guess I was surprised when you mentioned dairy. I have no problem with you. Of course, you're not buying the yogurts with a bunch of sugary crap on the bottom.
Yeah.
This would be natural yogurt.
This would be plain. So, and it's interesting because I go back and forth with dairy. I'm eating dairy now. I would like to give it up again. You can do completely plant-based eating with bright line eating easily. As a matter of fact, the table with all the proteins that you can eat are divided by animal and dairy based and plant-based, so that if you don't even want to see the animal and dairy based table, you could just look at the plant-based table and you can eat all the nuts, the seeds, the legumes, what else, all the soy, all the everything. So I've been plant-based quite often and my body doesn't love dairy, to be honest. So it's just the cheese, it tastes so good. But
I'm a big fan of cheese. Yeah, I don't have a ton, but there's some, and I like good quality cheese. I don't like the stringy cheese or the cheese slices. None of that stuff appeals to me. But a really good, aged cheddar. I don't know that I want to give that up. That's where I have my fuzzy lines, and things like that. But I'm glad to hear those are in bright line.
It is. And that's what's interesting is, when I feel like I want to break out, I'll have salami for lunch, right? Or I'll have breakfast sausages for breakfast, with hash browns. And I'm like that, and then a big bowl of fruit. That's a bright line breakfast, and so there are absolutely ways to scratch an itch in bright line eating.
How long ago did you come up with the concept of bright line eating?
7 or 8 years ago now. I was in my morning meditation. I have had a morning meditation practice for 18 years, and I'd been doing something like this way of life for 18 years in a 12-step food addiction program. I was watching the program. It wasn't growing. It was too doctrinaire for most people to want to be a part of. But I knew they were onto something, and I'd gotten my education, and we didn't even tell people my background. We should probably tell them. I mean, where all this was
I kind of assumed everyone knows who you are, but and I didn't even read your bio for that reason. I mean, we'll have it in the show notes and things like that, so people will see it.
Well, let me just I'm imagining there's plenty of people who have no idea who Susan Peirce Thompson. You're talking about me like I'm Brad Pitt or something. Like there's gonna be
in the nutrition industry. You are. Well, we won't use Brad Pitt. How about Angelina Jolie then? I mean, you're the Angelina Jolie of nutrition and health. But anyways, give us your plotted bio.
Well, just real quick for the people who don't know, I I turned to drugs to start to manage my weight problem when I was 14, and it escalated to crystal meth and cocaine and crack cocaine. And by the time I was 19 years old, I was a high school dropout and a prostitute and a crack addict, and I didn't have a place to live. And I was living like that. I got struck clean and sober when I was 20, and I haven't had a drink or a drug since then. So that's the biggest miracle of my life by far. And it enabled me that deep experience with addiction. And that's probably why, like earlier in this conversation, I was talking about addiction the way I was. Like, you know, it does something in me inherently sort of flinches when people kind of glibly say, oh, everyone's addicted to something. And I'm like, oh, Spirit, you have no idea, you know, like, so, but I was able to tell a year later when I was eating the way I used to smoke crack. I was staying up all night and binging, and I knew I was addicted to food. It was not hard to see. And I was obese by my mid-20s, but I had gone back to community college, transferred to UC Berkeley, got 4.0s, spoke at the graduation when I graduated, got into every grad school I applied to, and I ended up getting my Ph.D. in brain and cognitive sciences in one of the top 3 schools in the world, and doing a postdoc in Sydney, Australia for a couple of years. And so fast forward to 8 years ago, I had lost all my excess weight 18 years ago, and I'd been teaching a college course on the psychology of eating for many, many years. And I was in my morning meditation, January 26th of 2014. So we just passed 8 years ago. And I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are, but I don't claim to understand. But I heard a booming mandate that said, write a book called Bright Line Eating. And I'd never heard the words Bright Line Eating before. The universe just gave it to me and told me to write a book called Bright Line Eating. And so I started getting busy trying to write a book called Bright Line Eating. And that led me to start the Bright Line Eating email list. I think close to 2 million people, somewhere between 1.7 and 2 million people have joined the email list in those 8 years, 7.5 years. And then I started the program, the Bright Line Eating Boot Camp. I was a psychology professor, so I started by creating a bunch of courses, and now we folded it all together into a membership with a clear success path and just sort of continuity. You just join and you become a Bright Lifer. So anyway, that was your question, was what is a Bright Line? When did I start Bright Line Eating? So I had already lost my excess weight, 10 years prior or something like that. And I was already weighing and measuring my food and not eating sugar and not eating flour. But I'd never been taught the science of it. I was teaching some of that science in my college course on the psychology of eating. And it took me a while to piece together the science of like, how are people's brains being blocked from losing weight? Why can't people lose their weight? And yeah.
Well, another aspect of your story that's really intriguing to me is the fact that you mentioned cutting off eating after dinner. Now, intermittent fasting is now all the rage. Everyone knows it as intermittent fasting. Everyone's experimenting with eating windows and everything. But you were a thought leader back before this was even a thing. I mean, the research on this hasn't even been that great until about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it sounds like did you kind of intuit that as well, that people needed to stop eating after dinner? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's all stuff that comes from the 12-step food world, Overeaters Anonymous, and then the 5, 6, 7 programs that branched off from Overeaters Anonymous when they stopped providing food plans and a lot of structured guidance around what exactly to eat and not eat. But really in 1960, Overeaters Anonymous was founded, and the original people in that program did 3 meals a day. And I don't think it was about fasting windows or anything like that.
Right.
I think it was more, they were looking at Alcoholics Anonymous and they were trying to get clear on, if we're foodies like they're alcoholics, we need to get clear on what the first drink is. Like, what's the first bite, right? And, you can't be letting yourself eat all day long if you're addicted to food. And so it really became more about putting boundaries around your food to try to get something to abstain from, right? Like the idea of like, well, there's kind of my food to eat, and then anything beyond that is all the food that I'm abstaining from. That's not my food to eat during the day. And so in terms of the teeth brushing analogy, which is my favorite, let's be frank, Dave, we would not be successful at brushing if we had to do it 6 times a day. We'd be messing up on that all the time. 6 times a day wouldn't work. I couldn't brush and floss 6 times a
Right.
day. I do
Right.
twice a day flawlessly. 6 times a day, not so much, right? So if you really think about it as an automaticity thing, breakfast, lunch, and dinner work. Any eating any more frequently than that, the system starts to break down.
Interesting. And those 3 meals a day and cutting off, I mean, that one health habit, so many people, when they're introduced to intermittent fasting, which you're kind of teaching naturally, at least in terms of stopping eating after dinner, tons of people derail their health program just with that. You know, they can do a lot of things right, but as Craig Bongelli, the Canadian strength coach, said on this program, no one craves broccoli at 8 o'clock at night. And it's one of my favorite health, right? And after people eat dinner, they keep eating. And so that's fascinating because you kind of naturally have that built into your program from the beginning, to not eat after dinner and then wait till breakfast. And that's probably a 12-hour fast on average.
At least. Yeah. I mean, I usually finish my last bite of dinner by 6, and I don't eat my first bite of breakfast until 9.
Yeah.
It's an ideal fasting window every day, effortlessly. It's amazing.
And also critical to correct hormone balancing and production and cycling, which a lot of people don't realize. Every time we eat at 8 o'clock at night, we're screwing up what the body should be doing hormonally.
The circadian rhythm and the hormones. Absolutely. Yep. Totally.
Well, interesting. How do people access your $20 a month program? Where do they go?
brightlineeating.com. So for anyone who's been wondering, it's BRIGHTLINE, brightlineeating.com. And it's easy peasy. You can find it there. I also put out a free weekly vlog every week. And you can find that at brightlineeating.com, and that quiz. So you can find out where you are on a scale from 1 to 10. Dave, you got to take that quiz and let me know how you did. I'm curious. I'm predicting 6 or 7.
I'm tempted to cough up the $20 too, even though I don't feel like I have a lot of the addictions and really extreme kind of stuff that you described. Fact is, I think just getting access to some of your dietary ideas and meal plans and stuff like that would be well worth $20 a month, right? Because
there you go.
What you're recommending is really in line with what I teach anyway. I teach people to get 5 to 9 servings of vegetables, to stop eating after dinner. I mean, much of this is based on foundational health principles, but the difference is you specifically are helping people who have had long-term struggles or addictions to overcome them. It's not necessarily a general health program, although it certainly could be. And maybe I'll just have you touch base on that before I let you go. And do you have many people who come to you outside of the addiction world or the weight loss world? Because it sounds like just a great program for anybody, really. I mean, it could work for anybody from any background, even athletes probably would do well on your program. And so do you have many people who are not coming from the addiction background, or how does that work out?
We do. Absolutely. We do. A good friend of mine does Brightline Eating to keep his weight up. He's a beanpole. He's like 6'2" and 130 pounds naturally. And he wants to weigh like 157 pounds at 6'2". And he's got to eat more than he's inclined to eat. And he's got to lift weights. And the structure and the discipline of it, he needs Brightline Eating to make sure that he's eating enough food. He weighs and measures it. And when he stops doing Brightline Eating, his weight will drop right back down to 130 pounds. But when he does Brightline Eating, because it forces him to structure and plan and eat enough. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, Brightline Eating as a structure is applicable really for anyone who wants to get their eating squared away, for whatever reason.
Well, there you go, everybody. Whoever you are, whatever your background is, you could probably benefit from Brightline Eating, whether you're trying to gain weight, overcome addictions, find something because you've struggled and gone from one thing to another and nothing's worked. And like Dr. Thompson said at the very beginning of the episode, for a lot of people, this is their last stop, right? And I love that because I hear this all the time in my personal coaching. People that they're really down because they're 40 years old and for 20 years they have gone from one thing to another, and just can't find a home base that works long-term. And it sounds like you've created that very thing with Bright Line Eating.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful forever home for a lot of people. Really grateful for the movement we've built and the community we have. It's such a loving, supportive community. And just a final plug, people who start with that $20 a month membership within 2 months, they are seeing, this is all published research in peer-reviewed scientific journals. Their hunger levels have gone down. Their craving levels have gone down. They've lost weight equivalently, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, which means Bright Line Eating turns a post-menopausal woman's body into the fat burning body of a 20 or 30-year-old. And that I could go on about why that is, but it's hormonal. It has to do with when you're not eating sugar and flour, it doesn't matter that you don't have as much estrogen on board to facilitate insulin. Anyway.
Interesting.
And their peace and serenity with food has skyrocketed. Their confidence that they're going to reach all their goals, weight loss goals, has skyrocketed. They've lost a bunch of weight after 2 months. 2 years later, they've lost doubly more weight, and they're keeping it off as a group. Every pound kept off after 2 years. That's not to say that nobody ever regains weight in Bright Line Eating. It's just to say that in the group of anyone who regained some weight, someone else lost even more, because as a group, they've kept off every pound and then doubly more so 2 years later. So we're helping people like no one's ever helped people in the weight loss world. It's amazing. And their energy is up, their self-confidence is up, their perceived social support is up, their depression is down. A lot of them are off medications of all kinds. And yeah, just living their brightest, best life.
Well, it sounds fantastic. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. And for those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.